There are literally thousands of people here. Thousands and thousands of people who came to participate not only in the march, but now they're soon going to take their places before a stage for a very meaningful ceremony. We will see people, survivors, grandchildren of survivors lighting torches in memory of those who were lost here, and the memory of the 6 million Jews who died across Europe as part of that so-called final solution, which again, thank God, was not final. We're seeing close-ups of older people, young people. We're seeing the banners of this year's March of the Living. It is the 35th annual March of the Living. It's a very meaningful day. And I think everyone who I've spoken to so far today has commented about the unique feeling that one gets by actually coming here. And that is one of the missions of the March of the Living, to, as you can hear, perhaps you can hear, they're asking people to now take their seats for what will be a very poignant ceremony. It will include performers. It will include musical interludes. There's so much meaning. So many survivors have managed to come over the years. As we were talking about earlier, I personally cannot imagine what it's like for them to come back here, but they do come with a sense of purpose. Their generation will no longer be with us in a really short time. And many of the guests today have expressed great concern about that. How will the history of what they endured, how will the history of the Shoah, as we say in Hebrew, be carried on when that current generation, the people who lived through that, are no longer with us? Will we be able to sufficiently carry their message so that our descendants, 1 or 2 or more generations from now, will remember exactly what happened during the Second World War? Because one of the most familiar phrases you hear is never again. Something like that on that scale should never again happen. Of course, we have witnessed various attempted genocides over the last decade and a half, which is extremely disappointing. And among the people who are the most disturbed by those events in Rwanda and Eastern Europe are people who survived the Holocaust. It hits them particularly hard. I've spoken to survivors who are reflecting on very bloody conflicts and the attempted genocide or utter segregation again of other peoples. And for example, Elie Wiesel, who was a survivor, one of the most famous, who spoke out and wrote books about the Holocaust, shared his feelings. He was particularly upset about what was going on in Darfur. He became very active in trying to fight the genocide in Darfur, and his message was it carried particular weight because he was a survivor and what he endured. So let us all hope that with the continuation of learning, the continuation of connecting to this place, by watching these teenagers arrive, that they too will actually become living witnesses to what went on here, because they are seeing the crematoria. They're still here. They're seeing the barracks. They're seeing where the disinfection places are, where the selection took place of who would live and who would die. As I mentioned a little while ago, seeing the actual cattle trains that brought people here, and the number of people who suffered tremendously, not only during that journey, but who couldn't even survive that journey. Extremely young people, infants, old people. The fact they didn't even live to make it to this horrible place. But then, of course, near the end of the war, when Birkenau was an utter killing factory, which is what it became, they were gassing to death nearly 5,000 people a day here. And those horrible crematorium could not even keep up with the number of people who were massacred. So there were piles of their bodies just on the grounds which you are looking at now. Beyond imagination. To see the remains of those crematoria, to see the remains of the gas chambers. I believe that everybody who is here today, everyone who will come in the future, I believe we all become living witnesses by connecting to this place. For 35 years, the International March of the Living has taken place, I think, with that exact mission. I hope it will continue in the coming years. I've had friends If you're just tuning in, you will hear that my own daughter participated in the year 2011, and I think it affected her until today. She was really touched when she knew that I was coming today. I'm looking around and I'm so pleased to see, you can see all the different flags in addition to the Israeli flag. You can see all the delegations gathering, sitting on these grounds. Some of them are already in chairs, but a lot of the young people are sitting on the grass. They're waiting to be seated, but they're sitting where once, in fact, they're taking selfies, which this generation is apt to do. Some of them are actually celebrating because, again, with it being a very mournful place to be, ultimately this is a happy celebration. Ultimately, it is the March of the Living. Many of these young people you're looking at, many of them are descendants of survivors. They have surviving grandparents. And this is the March of the Living. This is either, we're coming up on the third generation as well as the fourth generation of surviving ancestors. Something is very interesting you can look into. There have been a lot of psychological studies about not just the trauma of someone who went through the camp experience or survived the Holocaust in one manner or another, but the incredible impact that had on their children, hearing their parents' stories. And now there are studies being done on the impact that the Holocaust had on the third generation of Holocaust survivors. Because it's something that is carried with you. It's something that carries down through the generations. And as the young participant I just spoke to commented, he had no personal connection to this place, but as a young Jewish fellow, he knew about it, he's been educated about it, and he wanted to come here and to learn. Joining me now is Alex Treyman, who you saw at the beginning of this broadcast and several times throughout, who was stationed in Auschwitz at the beginning of the march. Alex, how is it? You've been here many times before. How it was today for you? Was there anything different about today?
Well, this is my second time here. It's been 4 years. And every time is really like the first time you've been here because you're reliving a piece of history that is just beyond logic, beyond sanity. And when you come back to this place, you go into that same deep emotional feeling. And I don't think, maybe some of these people that I met, survivors that have been here for 20 years now in a row, they've gotten used to it. But I don't think this is really an experience that you can get used to.
I agree.
Where we're sitting.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing what you felt today. And we now move to live coverage of the closing ceremony of the International March of the Living 2023, being held at the base of the crematorium in the Birkenau extermination camp, where Holocaust survivors, leaders, and young people will be heard, along with a recitation of a prayer in memory of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust.